What kind of justice is this? Where the poor go to prison and the rich go free. White witnesses are rented, bought, and bribed. Evidence is made or manufactured. People are tried not because of any criminal action, but because of their political beliefs. These powerful statements were penned by a young black revolutionary woman in 1974 from her New Jersey prison cell. With this opening statement, Assata Shakur refused to bow down to the powers that be. She wanted the jury, the world, to understand that, quote, I am not on trial because I am a criminal or because I have committed a crime. People have been imprisoned because of their political beliefs and charged with criminal acts in order to justify that imprisonment. She challenged the jury to understand that the political and emotional context in which this case comes before you. Throughout her life as an activist, Assata experienced every form state violence can take: beatings by the police, years of false imprisonment, racist media smear campaigns, and even being targeted by the FBI, notably for her work with the Black Panther Party. Her story is one of revolutionary love, of a Black woman who loved as fiercely as she fought, who understood that liberation for her people was bound to the liberation of the poor and oppressed everywhere. As leftists dedicated to building an anti-racist movement, there are countless lessons we can draw from her life. So, who was Assata Shakur, and what can her struggle teach Marxists about the fight for Black liberation? As an aside, I will be referring to her by her birth name, which is Joanne. That is how she refers to herself in her autobiography, up until her name change. So just to avoid confusion, I'll use her birth name and then switch to her chosen name during her name change period. Joanne Deborah Byron was born in 1947 in New York, but spent much of her early childhood in Wilmington, North Carolina, the Jim Crow South, with her grandparents. They ran a restaurant and dance hall by the beach, a space built from the hard labor of her great-grandparents, who believed they had owned the land they worked their whole lives for. After their deaths, a white landowner's lawyer arrived, informing the family that her great-grandparents had only been permitted to live there for the duration of their lifetime. Her grandparents were forced to buy back their own property, a familiar story for Black families deceived by lifetime tenancy schemes across the South. Her grandmother, proud and uncompromising, raised Joanne to never let anyone disrespect you, never let anyone mistreat you. Dignity and pride were core values in her household, but Joanne noticed that these things were often tied to status and material success. Working in the restaurant, she served customers from all over the South. Theirs was the only Black beach for hours. There, she witnessed class divisions within the Black communities between what her grandmother called decent children from decent families versus alley rats. These early experiences exposed her to the colorist hierarchies within Black life under segregation. Despite moments of joy, life in the South was brutal for a young Black girl. White men would often tear through the family's parking lot late at night, shouting slurs and even firing guns into the air. On the way to the work, they'd passed a zoo that Joanne desperately longed to visit, only to later learn she couldn't. Her grandmother explained they would not be let in because they were Black. Her education reflected the same divide. In the segregated South, Black schools were greatly underfunded and fighting was commonplace. When she moved back north with her mother in New York, she found herself in a white classroom where white teachers smiled too hard and spoke too slowly when addressing her. The racism there wasn't loud or violent as she'd experienced in the South, but it was polite, careful, and in Joanne's mind, equally as unforgettable. Her Aunt Evelyn opened her world by taking her to museums, parks, theaters across the city. Yet Joanne noticed that in these galleries, Black art was all but invisible. She herself couldn't name a single Black painter. Her teachers often dismissed African art as primitive. By junior high, Joanne began slipping out to explore New York neighborhoods, Harlem becoming her favorite, always vibrant, colorful, and busy. After arguments with her mother over her long absences, she began to run away. On one escapade, she learned how to shoplift from peers, remembering the family's explanation. They trying to get my house from me, trying to take everything I got. I'm trying to survive the best way I know how. At 13, Joanne, her mother, and her sister moved to Jamaica, New York. After another argument with her mother, she ran away again, this time to Greenwich Village. She worked odd jobs, including a day at a factory cafeteria, where she demanded her pay from a white boss who had harassed her all day. When he refused, she stood her ground and ended up walking away with the money he owed her. She says, any Black woman practically anywhere in America can tell you about being approached, positioned, and harassed by white men. In Greenwich Village, she met Miss Shirley, a trans sex worker who took her under her wing. Miss Shirley didn't just advise her struggle on the streets, she exemplified the lengths people at the crossroads of oppression go through to stay alive. These years on and off the streets shaped her understanding of systemic racism. She saw how poverty, exploitation, and violence were baked into Black communities, particularly for women and girls. She observed, lived, and learned the structures of oppression. By the mid-1960s, at age 17, Joanne decided to leave school and enter the workforce. Jobs for a young Black woman with little experience were scarce, low-paying, and oftentimes toxic. During this time, she liked to hang out at a college cafe where she befriended a group of African students. They told her about their cultures, traditions, and foods from their home countries. When spending time with these students, this topic of Vietnam was brought up. It was 1964, and the US Vietnam tensions were rising. When asked her opinion, she stumbled her way through a brief statement of how it's okay, I guess, because we're fighting for democracy. One friend asked if she knew anything about the history of Vietnam. She told him she did not. The friend explained how the US was fighting for money in defense of US corporate interest and military bases. Joanne could hardly believe what she was hearing. She never forgot the first time she heard colonization and communism explained. Her patience with respectability politics was wearing thin by this point. At a black employment agency, she criticized Ebony magazine for promoting luxury brands that few black people could afford. Coworkers accused her of bringing black people down, repeating bootstrap myths she'd grown up with. Despite growing despondent and irritable, she cycled through office jobs until friends encouraged her to channel her anger into action. She enrolled at Manhattan Community College, and with a student body 50% BIPOC, she immersed herself in campus energy. She joined the Golden Drums, a group demanding better Black studies, more Black teachers, and responsiveness from administration. At a poetry event, they performed to African drums and spoke of revolutions. She questioned beauty standards she had followed blindly. Like many, she'd conked her hair, a painful chemical straightening process, without thinking why. She began to wear her hair in its natural curly fro and embraced the new mantra, Black is beautiful. Through the Golden Drums, she began to uncover the history buried behind white America's textbooks. She'd heard of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, but never of the thousands of enslaved Africans who rebelled and liberated themselves. When she first read about Nat Turner's rebellion of enslaved free black men rising up and killing 55 white slave owners, she felt something in her change physically. The realization that rebellion, not submission, ran through her blood. She threw herself into study. She read Black literature, saw plays by Black playwrights, and surrounded herself with students who talked about Black liberation not as a slogan, but as a real possibility. Everything she'd been taught collapsed. Lincoln freed slaves for economic, not moral reasons. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't even reach most enslaved people in Confederate states. George Washington fought for property rights, not freedom of all. The freedom of the US was built on the chains of others. A turning point came after a rally where Black parents demanding community controls of schools. On the subway after the rally, students debated controlling hospitals, housing, and welfare. When asked how to fund it all, someone said, "You can control the schools and the hospitals, but if you don't control the economic and military institutions, you can only go so far. What you need is a revolution." Confused but enthused, the attitudes amongst the students gradually shifted from discussions of reforms to discussions of revolutions. She later noted, um, if you were talking about anything except a few jive crumbs here and there, reform was just not going to get it. She explored political organizations, attending a Republic of New Africa meeting, struck by the confidence, joy, and pride of its members. She signed up for citizenship and was given the African name Ubombe Odale, which she soon forgot about. Campus politics surged with anti-war movements, labor strikes, and welfare demonstrations. Joanne thrived, connecting deeply with her BIPOC peers. She explored communist groups, learning the diversity within Marxism-Leninism, Trotskyism, Maoism, and more. She studied colonization, capitalist globalization, and occupation through Black and African revolutionaries like Kwame Nkrumah, Marcus Garvey, and Patrice Lumumba. She saw that kicking out colonizers was step one, but true liberation required socialism. Africa's wealth was produced by its working people, and it should belong to them, not a wealthy few. Oppression, she realized, came from class as well as race. She recalls, as long as you've got a system with a top and a bottom, Black people are always going to wind up on the bottom. Both the Democratic and Republican parties are controlled by the millionaires. She connected these lessons to the struggles around her, such as the Puerto Rican independence movement, indigenous resistance, and Latin American revolutions. Quote, once you understand something about the history of a people, their heroes, their hardships, their sacrifices, it's easier to struggle with them. For a lot of people in this country, people that live in places have no face. And this is the way the US government wants it to be. They figure as long as the people have no face and the country has no form, Americans will not protest when they send in the Marines to wipe them out. Though she considered herself a socialist by this point, she hadn't joined any groups. She enjoyed attending meetings and lectures, but was turned off by the condescending and paternalistic attitudes of some of the white people in these groups. Some of the older members thought that because they had been in the struggle for a long time, they knew the answers to the problems of Black people. Quote, white arrogance, she felt, divided the movement. I felt that instead of fighting together against a common enemy, they wasted time quarreling about who had the right line. She came to believe that black revolutionary parties need to be led by black revolutionaries, saying, I believe in uniting with white revolutionaries to fight, but it has to be on the basis of power and unity rather than weakness and unity. Seeking experiences beyond student organizing, she spent time in California, reading authors like Che Guevara, Carlos Miguel, and reports of guerrilla armies resisting U.S. imperialism. She met indigenous activists occupying Alcatraz, the Brown Beret, the Red Guard, and other radical groups of color. But her heart was with the Black Panther Party, drawn to how they identified the enemy not as white people, but as the classist imperial oppressors. Meeting the Oakland Panthers, she was struck by their humility and seriousness, visiting the branches often, but without yet committing to membership. Then came the death of 17-year-old Jonathan Jackson, killed trying to free his brother George Jackson and the Soledad brothers. Devastated, she reflected, if you know what's happening and you don't do anything but sit on your ass, then you're nothing but a punk. The first thing she did upon her return to New York was join the Black Panthers. Theory without practice is just as complete as practice without theory. The two have to go together. I was determined to do both, she recalls. Founded in 1966 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in Oakland, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense emerged as a revolutionary socialist organization committed to ending police brutality, racial oppression, and capitalist exploitation. They organized armed patrols to monitor police, ran free breakfast and health programs, built coalitions with other radical movements, and more. The Panthers reframed Black liberation as a struggle against capitalism itself. Their community programs prefigured a socialist society, meeting human needs collectively rather than through profit. Their emphasis on self-determination, anti-imperialism, and class solidarity reverberated through the civil rights era and beyond. As a Panther, Joanne worked in the medical cadre, providing free tuberculosis tests, sickle cell information, and helped set up a free health clinic in Harlem. She later joined the breakfast program, feeding poor Black children before school. She remembered an instance of a boy stuffing food into his pockets. When she approached him, he quickly explained that he wasn't stealing, he just wanted to take some to his mother. Everything is free, she told him. There's nothing to steal. Take whatever you'd like, offering him a wrapping to carry it. Children like him were exactly what the Panthers were fighting for, a world where no child felt they needed to steal to eat. Though she had left her grandmother's uplift philosophy behind, she carried its lessons of dignity everywhere. When confronted by an aggressive party leader who claimed she'd been expelled, she loudly scolded him, telling him his actions were unprincipled and arrogant. She was reinstated on the spot. Quote, you can't claim to love people you don't respect them. That's something that has got to be put into practice every day. By now, the name Joanne, she felt, no longer fit her. She began thinking about the name she'd be given by the Republic of New Africa years ago, Yumbambe Odale, but she had no idea what it meant. She wanted something meaningful to her. She decided on Assata Olubala Shakur. Assata means she who struggles. Olubala means love for the people, and Shakur means the thankful, a name she took in honor of her dear Black Panther and Black Liberation Army comrade Zaid Shakur. By 1969, sorry, my cat just jumped on a cabinet. By 1969, the Black Panther Party she had once loved was fracturing under internal and external pressures. Unknown to many members, the FBI's COINTELPRO had infiltrated chapters, sowed paranoia, and turned members against each other. Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver clashed. Members were unjustly expelled, survival programs were crushed, and hundreds of Panthers were jailed or killed. Notable young firebrand Fred Hampton was assassinated in his bed by the Chicago police and the FBI. Even other civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. Were killed and faced FBI harassment. COINTELPRO sought to destroy Black resistance and criminalize it entirely. Assata had been questioning the Panthers' direction. Male chauvinism, ideological confusion, and creeping reformism plagued the organization. Many in the Black Panther Party felt they could no longer operate freely or safely. Many militants went underground, forming the Black Liberation Army, or the BLA, a decentralized network committed to armed self-defense and sabotage. The government treated this as open war. Assata's role in the BLA made her one of the most hunted women in U.S. history, while other Black radicals continued to be assassinated and arrested on flimsy charges or straight up disappeared. In 1973, Assata was traveling with Zaid Malik Shakur and Suni Dada Soli when a routine New Jersey turnpike stop for a broken taillight escalated to tragedy. Zaid was killed, a state trooper died, and Assata was left bleeding from gunshot wounds, one through the arm, another through her back, while her hands were raised. She was eventually transferred to the hospital, where police verbally and physically assaulted her by calling her slurs, rubbing burning substances into her eyes, spitting on her food, barring visitors and her lawyer, and keeping her awake all night by yelling or stomping outside her room. She was shackled to her hospital bed. Upon arrest, she was charged with two bank robberies, the kidnapping of a Brooklyn heroin dealer, and attempted murder of two police officers, and 8 felonies related to the Turnpike shootout. The state had decided her guilt before the trial. Major headlines screamed, "Black militant kills cops," creating a narrative of her as violent, hateful, and dangerous. On July 4th, 1973, Assata released a statement from prison titled, "To My People." In this statement, she introduces herself as a Black revolutionary. She upended the status quo by directly calling out the police, the media, the courts, and the US government. I left a lot of this speech in because it is a kick-ass speech. So this next whole section is all her words, and I just kind of cherry-picked some of the cool lines. She says, "They call us murderers, but we did not murder Martin Luther King Jr. and countless others. For every pig that is killed in the so-called line of duty, there are at least 50 Black people murdered by the police. They call us thieves and bandits, but it was not us who stole millions of Black people from the continent of Africa, not we who rip off billions of dollars every year through tax evasions, illegal price fixing, embezzlement, consumer fraud, bribes, kickbacks, and swindles. They call us thieves, but we did not rob and murder millions of Indians by ripping off their homeland. It should also be clear to us by now who the real criminals are. Nixon and his crime partners have murdered hundreds of our third world brothers and sisters in Vietnam, Cambodia, Mozambique, Angola, and South Africa, as proved by Watergate. Every time a Black freedom fighter is murdered or captured, the pigs try to create an impression that they have quashed the movement, destroyed our forces, and put down the Black Revolution. That is nonsense. Black revolutionaries do not drop from the moon. We are created by our conditions, shaped by our oppression. Brothers and sisters from all walks of life who are tired of suffering passively make up the BLA. There is and always will be until every Black man, woman, and child is free, a Black Liberation Army. We must gain our liberation by any means necessary. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Across 7 courts in 2 states, Assata was acquitted of 4 charges, and the rest were dismissed for lack of evidence. The kidnapping case collapsed when cross-examination revealed that the plaintiff was a paid FBI informant and receipts disproved key prosecutor claims. Despite this, she was kept chained, beaten, and isolated for years awaiting trial. She was stripped naked, mocked, left in freezing cells with lights on 24/7, and confined for days in tiny cells. She spent a year in solitary confinement in men's prisons, shuffled across Rikers Islands and Clinton Correctional Facility under constant surveillance. She was not even allowed privacy while showering or using the bathroom. She was denied adequate medical care even while she was pregnant. She recounts the dilapidated states of prisons, particularly how they smell, recalling, "I don't care what jail I've been in, they all stink. They have a smell unlike any on earth, like blood and sweat and feet and open sores, and if misery had a smell, like misery." Her trial for the Turnpike case in 1977 was political theater. The trial was held in a predominantly white county with an all-white jury. Her lawyers faced harassment and contempt citations. Court transcripts revealed that at least 2 jurors selected displayed prejudice, with one admitting he had read the book Target Blue by an ex-NYPD PR director, Robert Daley, which named Assata as the soul of the BLA, the mother hen that kept them fighting. Chapters from the book were printed in the New York Magazine the day her trial was to begin. Nazi groups held racist rallies outside the courtrooms. Important documents related to her case went missing from the home of Stanley Cohen, one of her lawyers, and were later found in custody of the NYPD. Other defense lawyer Lennox Hines, director of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, called the trial a legal lynching and a kangaroo court. After 24 hours, the jury delivered a guilty verdict and Assata was given a life sentence. "It was obvious I didn't have 1 in a million chance to receive any kind of justice," she remembers of the trial. Even though her fingerprints were not on any weapons, she could not have fired a gun based on her injuries, and no gunpowder residue was found on her. It did not matter when she was everything white America feared, a radical, revolutionary Black woman who was not afraid to fight back. In 1979, with the help of BLA comrades posing as visitors, she escaped from Clinton Correctional Facility for Women. Years later, she surfaced in Cuba, where she was granted political asylum. She lived in Havana until her death just 2 months ago now, on September 25th, 2025. Accumulation of the liberative spirits who came before her, a force that disturbed business as usual, Assata was unabashed in challenging the preconceived notion of violence, poverty, justice, and democracy. She poured endless love into her comrades and community, never missing a chance to uplift those around her. Fiercely revolutionary, she understood that liberation was inseparable from solidarity across race, class, and borders, and that true justice demands nothing left than the transformations of the systems that oppress her people. I picked out 6 lessons here that we can learn from her story. Number one, racism and capitalism are inseparable. Assata understood that this racism isn't a flaw in an otherwise fair system, but is a tool of class division. As fellow Black Panther Angela Davis said, racism is a weapon used by the wealthy to increase profits they bring by paying Black workers less for their work. Malcolm X shared in this sentiment, saying, "You can't have capitalism without racism." Assata saw racism not as a personal prejudice, but a system born from exploitation. Quote, imperialism is the underlying motor of racism, the underlying reason that racism is being promoted in all its forms. As Marxist Stuart Hall noted, race is the modality in which class is lived. Through Assata's historical materialist lens, the superstructure of law serves the capitalist base. Marxists can take from this that racism cannot be abolished without abolishing capitalism, which relies on racial hierarchies to reproduce. Racism isn't a flaw, it's a built-in feature, from slavery to mass incarceration. As Cedric Robertson wrote in Black Marxism, the plantation was the first factory. Number two is that the state and the police protect capital, not people. Assata's persecution by the FBI under COINTELPRO and the courts demonstrate Marx's statement, the executive of the modern state is but a committee for the management of common affairs of the bourgeoisie. COINTELPRO wasn't about law and order. It suppressed movements threatening the racial and economic hierarchies on which U.S. capitalism depends. The government's campaign against Assata and the Black Panther Party through infiltration, psychological warfare, false imprisonment, and assassination reveals that the police are not an impartial arbiter of law, but as armed thugs protecting private property and white supremacy. As Brian Bean writes in Their End Is Our Beginning, every capitalist state is a police state. Huey P. Newton described the police as an occupying army in the Black community, highlighting how the state contains surplus populations to prevent collective resistance. The system that criminalized the Black Panthers for free breakfast programs and political education protects corporate profiteers and war criminals. Assata's trial and imprisonment were a display of the state defending ruling class interest against revolutionary challengers. The state defends private property, not justice, and we cannot rely on it for liberation, nor reform racism out of it. As Lenin wrote in State and Revolution, the working class must break up, smash the ready-made state machinery. While the state exists, there can be no freedom, and with freedom, there will be no state. Assata understood this deeply. For Marxists, her case is a stark reminder that state reforms cannot truly free the oppressed, and systems built against them must be dismantled and replaced by socialism rooted in working class power. The third lesson is resistance is justified. In The Wretched Earth, Franz Fanon wrote, the violence of the colonized man is the cleansing force through which he recovers his self-respect. Assata rejected passive resistance to systemic brutality. She understood the oppressed have a right, a duty to self-defense. Revolutionary violence is a form of reclaiming humanity. Her persecution under COINTELPRO, framing them for the Turnpike shooting and torture in custody, showed the state's willingness to destroy anyone challenging white supremacy and capitalism. Yet she never abandoned her belief in liberation, stating, no one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. Resistance to her was not a blind hatred, but an act of love necessary for the survival of her people. As Palestinian freedom fighter Leila Khaled said, we have chosen to resist because we refuse to die in silence. Assata's life demonstrates that the oppressed have every right to resist, refusing pacifism or respectability. Audre Lorde warns that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. For Marxists, Assata's courage reinforces that liberation will never be granted. It must be seized by any means necessary. Number 4 is international solidarity as a necessity. Assata consistently connected Black liberation to global anti-imperialist struggles. She saw the struggles of Black Americans as part of the same world system of exploitation that Marx describes in Capital. Only capitalist commodity production is an epoch-making mode of exploitation. With her observation that the same corporations that exploit Black people in the US are the same that exploit people in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This is Lenin's imperialism that has the highest stage of capitalism. She taught that liberation is collective and must be seized by the masses. Assata rejected the myth of the exceptional Black who rises to the oppression through respectability. Her autobiography repeatedly emphasizes we and us, comrades, community, people, reflecting Marx's view that freedom is social, not individual. No one is free until we are all free. Assata knew that placing power in the hands of a few Black faces in high places was insufficient, and she sought power in the hands of in the hands of people, both America and worldwide. For Marxists today, her life reminds us that anti-racism must also be anti-imperialist. We cannot fight capitalism at home while ignoring the violence it perpetuates globally. We can also learn from her that revolution requires both theory and practice. Assata studied revolutionary theory, but also organized intangible struggle. Hubert Harrison noted that it is not enough to think or talk. One must act for social change. Assata articulated this link, saying, theory without practice is just as incomplete as practice without theory. The two have to go together. I was determined to do both. Fred Hampton adds, you can't just talk about revolution. You gotta live it every day in the streets, the programs, and the struggle. Assata approached every topic from multiple angles, using her theoretical knowledge to inform her activism. Engagement with diverse groups encouraged open-minded thinking. Her experience on the streets and community work deepened her understanding of oppression and strategy, keeping her always reading, learning, and growing politically. As Rosa Luxemburg reminds us, those who do not move do not notice their chains. Assata embodied what Marx meant when he said, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." Her legacy reminds Marxists that our theory must always serve the movement and not remain abstract. And the last lesson we can take from Assata's life is revolutionary optimism. Even after torture, loss, and exile, Assata never lost faith in the people's capacity to rise up. Revolutionary optimism is the belief that systemic change is possible even under repression. This guided Assata. Condemned to a life sentence, she never gave up on her comrades or their struggles and eventually escaped prison. From her early radicalization with the Golden Drums to campus activism, she believed change could come through collective action. Confronting setbacks such as administrative corruption, limited power, or internal debates in leftist spaces, she remained committed to building Black community power. Antonio Gramsci captured this spirit when he said, I am a pessimist because of intelligence, but an optimist because of will. Assata shows that believing liberation is possible, fuels courageous resistance, and resisting oppression concretely affirms that that change is achievable. She lived this principle through organizing, self-defense, and unwavering advocacy, even when the stakes were literally life and death. The world, she wrote, in spite of all its oppression, is a beautiful place. Assata's poem, Affirmation, sums this up beautifully. I have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy. And if I know anything at all, it's that a wall is a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of life and the fire of truth. I believe that a lost ship, steered by tired, seasick sailors, can still be guided home to port. Thanks, comrades.